The wagon stopped hard in front of the orphanage, and Clara Moss felt a sharp kick from the baby inside her, like a warning. She held her breath, pressed a hand to her swollen belly, and stared at the building ahead. The place looked tired, crooked, like it was barely standing on its own will. Paint peeled off the walls, and dust hung in the afternoon air. Above the door, a faded sign read St. Michael's Home for Foundlings. Someone had crossed out the word home and written holding instead. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. This story gets much more intense, and I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Clara swallowed. She had $1.47 in her pocket. The dollar was enough to buy 2 children. That was what the notice in town said. Plain as that. No softness. No shame. The rest of the money might keep her fed for a week if she mixed flour with water and wild onions. Her husband had been buried 4 months ago. The ranch was dying. Winter was coming fast, and she was pregnant and alone. She didn't come here because she wanted to. She came because she had no other choice. Before she could knock, the door opened. A tall woman stood in the doorway, thin as a fence post, her hair pulled tight, her gray dress buttoned all the way up. Her eyes were sharp and tired at the same time. "Mrs. Moss," she said, like it wasn't a question. "Yes," Clara replied. "You're here for the children." The word children felt wrong. Heavy. The woman stepped aside. "Come in." Inside, the air smelled damp and sour, like old clothes and boiled cabbage. The hallway was narrow. Clara followed, her boots echoing softly on the wooden floor. She passed rooms where small cots sat in rows. Thin blankets. No toys. Somewhere a child coughed. Somewhere else, someone cried quietly, like they had learned not to make noise. At the last door, the woman stopped. "You can choose any 2, she said. "Working age." "How many are there?" Clara asked. 14. Maybe 13. One's been sick. She said it like she was counting sacks of grain. Clara pushed the door open. The room was larger than she expected. A single high window let in pale light. Dust floated through it like ash. Children sat along the walls, some on crates, some on the floor. Boys and girls, maybe 4 years old to maybe 14. All of them thin, all of them quiet. None of them smiled. None of them moved. For a moment, Clara couldn't breathe. They didn't look like children. They looked like something left behind. "Take your time," the woman said from behind her. "They don't bite." Mostly. Clara stepped forward. The floor creaked, and one small boy flinched. She scanned their faces, trying to imagine them on her ranch. Mending fences, carrying water, helping her survive. Her eyes landed on 2 boys in the far corner. They sat close together. Dark hair, pale faces. One older, one younger. Maybe 10 and 8. Their shoulders touched. Unlike the others, they were looking straight at her. Not begging, not afraid, watching. The older boy whispered something to the younger one. Clara moved closer. "What are your names?" The older boy lifted his chin. "I'm Ethan. This is Luke." His voice was calm, but there was something tight beneath it, like someone who had learned to stay alert. "How old are you?" "I'm 10. He's 8. You brothers?" Ethan nodded. "How long have you been here?" 3 years. Clara's chest tightened. She looked at their thin wrists, the holes in their clothes. She thought of her empty barn, her broken fences, her husband's grave. "Can you work?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," Ethan said. Luke nodded. Clara turned back to the woman. "I'll take these 2. The woman's mouth twitched. "Good choice." Clara pulled the dollar from her pocket. It felt heavier than it should have. She handed it over. "They're yours now," the woman said. Outside, the boys climbed into the wagon without being told. As Clara pulled the reins, Luke leaned toward his brother and whispered something. Ethan whispered back. Clara glanced over her shoulder. "What did you say?" Ethan looked at her. "Nothing, ma'am." But Luke's lips were still moving. This time, Clara caught the words. "Your husband." Her hands tightened on the reins as the wagon rolled forward. And deep in her chest, something cold began to grow. The ranch came into view at dusk, its outline dark against a bruised sky. Clara slowed the wagon and sat there longer than she needed to, staring at what was left of her life. The house leaned the same way it always had, porch sagging, chimney cracked. The barn looked worse than she remembered. Half the roof had caved in during the spring storms, and she had never fixed it. There had been no money, no strength. Some days, no reason. She climbed down slowly, her body heavy, her back aching. The boys jumped down behind her. They landed light, almost silent, like they were used to not being noticed. "That's the barn," Clara said, pointing. "You'll sleep in the loft. There's hay. I'll bring blankets after supper." Ethan nodded. Luke said nothing. They stood close together, eyes moving, taking everything in. Clara suddenly felt exposed, like they could see every crack in the place, every failure she had tried not to think about. "Come on," she said. "I'll show you the well." She led them behind the house. Ethan worked the pump without being asked. The handle groaned, then water burst out cold and clear. Luke bent and drank from his hands like he hadn't had enough water in a long time. Clara filled a bucket and carried it inside, the boys following. The house smelled of smoke and dried herbs. 2 chairs, 1 table, 1 stove. It felt smaller with them in it. "I'll make supper," Clara said. "Wash up outside." They did quietly. When they came back in, they sat where she pointed. She spooned out cornmeal mush into tin bowls. It was thin. She knew it. She felt ashamed anyway. They ate without speaking. No slurping. No wasted movement. "You'll work tomorrow," she said, watching them. "Fence needs fixing. Field needs turning. I can't pay you, but you'll eat and have a roof." "Yes, ma'am," Ethan said. Luke looked at her with eyes too old for his face. "You understand?" she asked him. He nodded once. "You don't talk much," she said. "He does," Ethan replied. "Just not to strangers." "I'm not a stranger," Clara said, sharper than she meant to. "I bought you. That makes you my responsibility." The words hung there, ugly and heavy. Ethan's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. That night, Clara sat by the stove long after the boys had gone to the barn. The wind rattled the walls. She pressed a hand to her belly and thought of her husband, Daniel. The way he used to promise things would turn out fine. The way he had been wrong. Later, she heard voices. Low, careful, from the barn. Clara pulled on her shawl and stepped outside. Cold cut through her dress. The lantern glowed faintly in the loft. She climbed the ladder slowly, every rung reminding her she was tired and scared and very alone. Ethan was speaking, his voice tight. "You shouldn't have said it. She needs to know," Luke said. "She's not ready. She'll never be." Clara stepped up into the loft. "Know what?" Both boys turned. Silence stretched. Luke stood. He was smaller, thinner, but steady. "We knew your husband," he said. Clara felt the world tilt. "What?" "Before he died," Luke said. "We knew him." Ethan looked away. "We are his brothers." Clara grabbed the ladder to stay upright. "That's not possible." "It is," Luke said. She looked at Ethan. "Is it true?" After a long moment, he nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Her legs gave out. She sat hard on the ladder, breath shaking. "He never told me," she whispered. "He was ashamed," Ethan said. "Of what?" "Of leaving us." Clara didn't sleep. At dawn, she called them inside and made them sit. "Tell me everything," she said. Ethan spoke. About their parents dying. About Daniel trying. About promises. About being left behind. When he finished, Clara's voice was raw. "Why tell me now?" "Because you deserve the truth," Luke said. "What do you want from me?" she asked. Ethan laughed without humor. "Nothing." "Then stay," Clara said quietly. "Please." Luke took her hand first. "We'll stay." Ethan hesitated, then nodded. Outside, the sun rose. And for the first time in months, Clara felt something shift. Not hope, not yet, but the idea that she might not face the future alone. The days that followed were harder than Clara expected, and she had expected plenty of hardship. She woke before the sun, her back stiff, her legs aching before the work even began. Ethan and Luke were already outside most mornings, waiting. They never asked what to do. They just started. Fence posts, frozen ground, buckets of water hauled from the creek until their arms shook. They worked like boys who knew hunger too well. Clara worked beside them until her hands burned and her belly tightened so hard it scared her. When she needed to rest, she hated herself for it. Ethan noticed everything. He never said a word, but he would step in front of her, take the heavier load, pretend it was nothing. Luke stayed quieter. He followed instructions exactly. When he smiled, which was rare, it was quick, like he didn't trust it to last. They ate together at the table, but it never felt easy. Silence filled the space where family should have been. Ethan spoke only when needed. Luke watched Clara the way a wounded animal watched an open hand. At night, Clara lay awake listening to the wind and the house settling. The boys slept in the barn. She told herself it was temporary. She told herself many things. 2 weeks in, she woke to a sound that made her chest tighten. Crying. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet, broken sobs carried by the cold air. She sat up, heart racing, and listened. The sound came from the barn. Clara wrapped her shawl around her shoulders and stepped outside. The moon was thin. The barn door stood open. Light flickered in the loft. She climbed the ladder slowly, one rung at a time, her breath shallow. When she reached the top, she saw Luke sitting alone, knees pulled to his chest, his face buried in his hands. His shoulders shook. "Luke," she said softly. He flinched, then wiped his face fast, like he'd been caught doing something wrong. "I'm fine." "No, you're not," Clara said, sitting beside him carefully. "What's wrong?" He shook his head. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then his voice cracked. "I miss him." Clara didn't ask who. "Daniel," Luke whispered. "He used to tell us stories. Said we'd have a ranch. Said we'd be together again." Clara swallowed. Her throat hurt. "He shouldn't have left you," she said. "That was wrong." "Ethan says he didn't love us," Luke said. "Ethan is angry," Clara replied. "Anger can lie." Luke looked at her. "Do you think he loved us?" She thought of her husband sitting alone on the porch at night. The way he held her too tight sometimes. The fear she never understood. "Yes," she said. "I think he loved you so much it scared him." Luke stared at the lantern. "Will you leave us too?" The question hit her harder than any labor pain. "No," Clara said, pulling him close despite the ache in her body. "I'm not going anywhere." They sat like that until footsteps sounded on the ladder. Ethan stopped when he saw them. His face was guarded. "Sit," Clara said gently. He hesitated, then sat on Luke's other side. "I'm sorry," Ethan said finally, "for what I said before." Clara shook her head. "I was desperate. I didn't think about what it meant for you." "You gave us a chance," Ethan said. "That matters." "It's not enough," Clara replied. "You deserve more." Luke reached for Ethan's hand. Ethan let him. Outside, the wind eased. Inside the small circle of lantern light, something fragile began to form. Not trust. Not yet. But something close. Clara noticed the change slowly, the way you notice winter easing its grip. It wasn't sudden. It didn't come with warmth or relief. Just small things that added up when she wasn't paying attention. Ethan started fixing things without being asked. A loose hinge on the door. A broken rung on the ladder. He did it quietly, like it wasn't worth mentioning. Luke began sitting closer to her at the table, not touching, just near enough that she could feel his presence. Sometimes he would push his bowl toward her without a word when she was too tired to finish her food. She told herself not to read into it. Her body grew heavier by the day. Some mornings, tying her boots left her breathless. She hated that Ethan saw it. She hated more that he pretended not to. When her back seized while hauling water, he stepped in front of her and took the bucket, his voice calm but firm. "I've got it. I can still work," she snapped. "I know," he said, and somehow that made it worse. One afternoon, Clara slipped in the mud behind the barn. It wasn't dramatic. No scream, just a sharp fall that knocked the breath out of her. She sat there, hands shaking, fear rising fast and ugly in her chest. The baby kicked hard like it was angry. Luke was there first. He dropped to his knees beside her. "Did it hurt?" he asked, panic breaking through his quiet voice. "I'm fine," she said too quickly. Ethan arrived seconds later. He didn't ask questions. He just helped her up, steady and careful like he had done it before. As they walked back to the house, Clara realized her hands were gripping his sleeve. That night, she cried alone by the stove. Not loud, just enough to let it out. She cried for her husband, for the ranch, for the fear that followed her everywhere now, for the boys who shouldn't have had to grow up so fast. The crying stopped when she heard footsteps. Luke stood in the doorway, unsure. "I heard something," he said. "I'm fine," she lied. He nodded, but he didn't leave. Instead, he crossed the room and held out something small. Daniel's old pocket knife. Clara hadn't seen it in weeks. You dropped it, Luke said. I kept it safe. Her throat closed. Thank you. He sat on the floor near her chair. Not touching. Just there. Ethan thinks you don't want us, Luke said suddenly. Clara's heart tightened. Why would he think that? Because you don't smile much, Luke said. And because you look tired when you see us. I'm tired because I'm scared, Clara said honestly. Not because of you. Luke thought about that. Scared of what? Of failing, she said. Of not being enough. Luke nodded slowly, like the words made sense. A few days later, Clara woke before dawn to sharp pain low in her back. Real pain. She froze, hand on her belly, breath shallow. It faded after a long minute, but fear stayed. She told the boys nothing. By midday, the pain returned stronger. Ethan noticed the way she moved, the way she pressed her palm against her side. You should sit, he said. I can't afford to, she replied. You can't afford not to, he said, voice tight. When another pain hit, she doubled over. That was enough. Ethan helped her inside. Luke hovered, pale and shaking. I'm not having the baby, Clara said, trying to stay calm. Not yet. Ethan swallowed. What if it's early? Then we'll deal with it, she said, though fear roared in her chest. They sat with her for hours. No talking, just presence. When the pain finally eased, exhaustion crashed over her. That night, she moved their blankets into the house. You'll sleep in the loft, she said. Ethan hesitated. Are you sure? Yes, she said. I don't want to be alone anymore. Luke smiled. A real one. Brief, but real. As Clara lay in bed, listening to the boys whisper above her, she realized something scared her more than childbirth, more than hunger, more than winter. Losing them. And that was the moment she understood they were no longer just boys she had bought to survive. They were already becoming something else. Winter arrived earlier than Clara had hoped. The first snow fell in heavy silence, covering the fields and the broken fences like a lie that everything was clean again. The cold settled into her bones, deep and stubborn. Her belly was heavy now, her steps slow and careful, and every night she wondered if this would be the night the baby came. Ethan and Luke worked without being asked. They chopped wood until their hands cracked. They patched the barn roof before the worst storms hit, climbing up in freezing wind while Clara watched from below, fear twisting her stomach tighter than the cold ever could. When she told them to stop, Ethan shook his head. We'll finish it, he said. You need the roof. That word stayed with her. One night, the wind howled so loud it shook the windows. Snow piled against the door. Clara woke with pain that didn't fade. It came in waves, stealing her breath, bending her forward. This is it, she whispered, terror sharp and sudden. Luke was at her side before she finished the sentence. Ethan, he called, voice breaking. Ethan didn't panic. He grabbed her coat, helped her sit, his hand steady even when his face wasn't. I'll get Mr. Carter, he said. You can't, Clara gasped. The road. I'll make it, he said. And he did. Hours passed. The pain was blinding. Luke stayed with her, holding her hand, whispering the same words over and over. You're okay. You're okay. I'm here. When Ethan returned with the old neighbor, dawn was breaking through the storm. The baby cried before Clara even realized it was over. A girl. Clara held her with shaking hands, tears running freely now. Ethan and Luke stood at the foot of the bed, stunned. Do you want to hold her? Clara asked. Luke went first. He cradled her like something sacred. Ethan followed, hands trembling. She's perfect, he whispered. Clara nodded. Her name is Hope. Outside, the storm eased. And inside that small house, something stronger than winter settled in. The house felt different after the baby arrived. Louder, yes, but also warmer, like the walls themselves were finally doing what they were meant to do. Hope cried often, sharp and demanding, especially at night. Clara moved slowly now, her body sore in ways she hadn't known before. Some nights, she sat on the edge of the bed with tears running down her face, rocking the baby and whispering apologies she didn't fully understand herself. Luke heard everything. He would come down quietly, rubbing sleep from his eyes, and sit nearby without being asked. Sometimes he just held Hope while Clara rested her arms. Other times he hummed softly, the kind of sound you made when words felt too big. Hope settled faster with him. That both comforted and hurt Clara at the same time. Ethan stayed more distant, but not absent. He took on more work without a word. More wood. More repairs. He barely slept. Clara saw it in the dark circles under his eyes, the way he stood a little stiffer every day. One morning, Clara found him sitting on the porch steps before dawn, head in his hands. "You don't have to carry this alone," she said gently. Ethan didn't look up. "Someone has to." Clara lowered herself beside him, wincing as she Saturday. "I carried everything alone once too," she said. "It nearly broke me." He finally looked at her. His eyes were tired, older than they should have been. "If I stop, everything falls apart." "That's not true," she said. "That's fear talking." He laughed quietly. "Fear's all I've known." The word stayed with her. As weeks passed, Clara noticed Ethan watching her with hope, his face tight, unreadable. One afternoon, she handed the baby to Luke and went to find him behind the barn. "You don't trust me," she said plainly. Ethan wiped his hands on his coat. "I don't know how to." "That's honest," Clara said. "But you're punishing yourself for something that wasn't your fault." He shook his head. "Daniel left us. And then he died. And now she gets everything we didn't." The jealousy in his voice surprised her, but it didn't anger her. "She doesn't replace you," Clara said softly. "She connects us." Ethan looked away, jaw tight. "That's easy to say when you weren't the one left behind." Clara stepped closer, her voice steady but raw. "I lost him too. I lost the future I thought I had. And I'm still standing because you're here." That stopped him. "You matter," she continued. "Not because you work. Not because you're useful. Because you're here." For the first time, Ethan's shoulders dropped. Just a little. That night, he came inside earlier than usual. When Hope cried, he froze in the doorway, unsure. "Do you want to hold her?" Clara asked. He hesitated. "What if I mess up?" "You will," she said. "So will I." He took Hope carefully, like she might disappear if he breathed wrong. She stared up at him, eyes wide and unfocused. After a moment, she wrapped her tiny fingers around his thumb. Ethan sucked in a breath like he'd been punched. "She knows you," Luke said softly. Ethan swallowed hard. "I don't deserve this." "None of us do," Clara said. "That's not how love works." Spring came slowly. Snow melted into mud. The creek swelled. Clara planted what she could, her hands in the dirt, while Hope slept nearby. The boys worked beside her. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they didn't. But the silence no longer felt sharp. One afternoon, Clara found Ethan standing at Daniel's grave under the cottonwood tree. "I used to rehearse what I'd say to him," Ethan said without turning. Every version ended with anger. "And now?" Clara asked. "I tell him I'm still angry," he said. "But I forgive him anyway." Clara nodded. "That's enough." As the sun dipped low, Luke ran up holding Hope, who squealed at the sound of his voice. Ethan smiled without realizing it. And in that moment, Clara understood something simple and heavy all at once. Broken people didn't heal by being perfect. They healed by staying. Spring settled in quietly, without asking permission. The ground softened, the creek swelled, and green pushed through places Clara had already given up on. The ranch still looked rough, but it no longer felt dead. It felt like something that was breathing again, slowly, carefully, the way people do after a long illness. Hope grew stronger every day. Her cries filled the house, sharp and demanding, then softened into small noises that sounded almost like laughter. Clara learned her rhythms the hard way. Sleepless nights, aching arms, moments where she stood in the kitchen holding her daughter and wondered how close she had come to losing everything. Ethan and Luke adjusted without being told. Luke was gentle with Hope, always talking to her like she understood every word. He told her about the sky, the fields, the chickens, things that made no sense to a baby but somehow calmed her. Ethan pretended not to watch, but he always stood close when Luke held her, like he was guarding something fragile and important. Clara noticed how careful Ethan was around the baby, how he hesitated before touching her, how he washed his hands longer than needed. One evening, she caught him standing near the cradle, staring down at Hope with a look she recognized too well. Fear mixed with longing. "You can pick her up," Clara said softly. Ethan shook his head. I don't want to drop her. I was afraid of that too, Clara replied. Still am. He looked at her then. What if I get attached? The honesty in his voice hit her harder than any argument ever had. You already are, she said. Ethan let out a breath he'd been holding for years. Slowly, carefully, he reached down and lifted Hope into his arms. She blinked up at him, then yawned. He smiled before he could stop himself. She doesn't know any of this, he whispered. She doesn't know how messed up we are. No, Clara said. She'll just know who stayed. That night, the three of them sat on the porch while Hope slept, wrapped in a blanket. The air smelled like wet earth and would smoke. For once, no one rushed inside. Luke broke the silence. Do you think Daniel would have been proud? Clara felt the question settle deep. I think he would have wished he'd been braver, she said. But yes, I think he would have been proud of you. Ethan stared out of the fields. Sometimes I still hate him. That's allowed, Clara said. Forgiveness doesn't erase anger. It just keeps it from owning you. Ethan nodded slowly. As the summer crept closer, neighbors began stopping by. First Eli Carter, then others. Some brought food. Some brought tools. Some wanted to see the baby everyone had heard about. Clara accepted help when it came. She stopped apologizing for needing it. One afternoon, Clara stood at the edge of the field watching Ethan and Luke work side by side. They laughed at something small, something unimportant. The sound caught her off guard. She realized it had been a long time since she'd heard laughter that didn't feel forced. Hope stirred in her arms. You're lucky, Clara whispered to her daughter. You're growing up where people fight to stay. Years later, when the ranch stood strong again and Hope ran barefoot through the grass, Clara would think back to that dollar she'd spent at the orphanage. How it had felt like desperation, like shame, like survival. She would understand then what she only felt now. That dollar hadn't bought her help. It had given her a family. Years passed in a way Clara never expected. Not fast, not easy, just steady, one ordinary day at a time. The kind of days people rarely talk about, but the kind that quietly build a life. The ranch didn't become rich. It didn't turn into something impressive, but it became solid. The fences held. The field produced enough. The roof no longer leaked when it rained. And the house, once so quiet it felt hollow, was full of sound. Footsteps, laughter, arguments that ended in understanding instead of silence. Hope grew into a strong, curious child. She followed Ethan everywhere, asking endless questions, trusting him without hesitation. He complained, but he never walked away. Luke became her shadow, patient and gentle, reading to her at night, tying her shoes when Clara's hands were full. When she called them her brothers, neither of them corrected her. Clara watched it all with a quiet ache in her chest. Some nights, she sat alone on the porch after everyone slept, thinking about the woman she used to be. The woman who stood outside an orphanage with $1 in her pocket and fear in her heart. The woman who believed survival was all she could hope for. Ethan joined her one evening, older now, broader in the shoulders, his face no longer hard all the time. People in town keep asking how you did it, he said. Did what? Started over. After everything. Clara smiled faintly. I didn't do it alone. Ethan was quiet for a moment. I used to think being left meant you weren't worth staying for. Clara turned to him. And now I know some people leave because they're weak, he said. And some people stay because they choose to be better. Luke stepped onto the porch then, Hope half asleep in his arms. She asked for you, he said to Clara. Clara took her daughter, feeling the familiar weight, the warmth, the life she almost hadn't had the strength to carry. That night, Clara tucked Hope into bed and sat between the boys, no longer boys, really on the edge of the loft. She looked at them and felt something settle inside her. Peace, finally. I want you to know something, she said. I didn't save you. Luke frowned. You gave us a home. You gave yourselves a future, Clara said. I just stayed. Ethan nodded slowly. So did we. That was the truth of it. Not that pain disappeared. Not that the past stopped hurting. But they stayed. They chose each other again and again, even when it was hard, even when walking away would have been easier. And that was the lesson Clara carried with her for the rest of her life. Family isn't made by blood or money or obligation. It's made by the people who don't leave when they have every reason to. She never talked about the dollar again. Not because she was ashamed, but because it no longer mattered. What mattered was what came after, what they built together, what they chose. And in the end, that choice was worth more than anything money could ever buy.